they were much more likely to want to gravitate towards the descriptive statistics because they were the most easily consumed. And they were trying to explain why 20% of the driver stop might be black, but 5% of the population is black. And so it was important to have those conversations with the department, but it was also really important to educate them about how to interpret and what the other methodologies mean and how it should all be seen together. And ultimately, what we found is I found less that the departments have found a ton of usefulness in the descriptive statistics as much as the public has, and in particular the media. One of the reasons why us sort of non-statisticians sort of pushed to keep those in there was we knew that the first thing local reporters were going to do was because we put all of our data out there. We also put the raw data. We said, if you want to analyze it yourself, you're welcome to. We knew that they were going to pull the percentage of black drivers stopped in town A and go to online and look up how many black people live there and make a comparison. And so the idea was that we wanted to ensure that we were shaping the conversation. We were providing information that the media could consume when they reported on it. And we were also outlining some of the assumptions being made in those methodologies so that it was maybe talked about in a more appropriate way. And that has helped to avoid some of the issues that we saw other states having when they only relied on descriptive statistics, which is, there would be a big headline. It would say there was a big problem. The police would push back, say, no, that's not true. You didn't account for these 10 things. And rather than using data to bring people together, to build trust and legitimacy in law enforcement, the data was actually being weaponized to tear the groups apart. And so we felt like if we were absent in using that and we made the document we produced too academic, the general public and the media would glaze over it and they would go back to what they were comfortable with. And we wanted to be engaged in that conversation with them. So that's why we kept it. I don't know if that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only other thing I'd add to that is, I think the biggest takeaway from, our experience in Connecticut in particular is Ken's ability to kind of, keep all the stakeholders at the table for a 10-year period. And, I think that, is partially due to, great leadership on Ken's part. Part of that is due to the fact that we've, structured the entire report as a process where, advocates and the law enforcement community both sit at the table, and where there's this clear follow-up procedure that we do to really find out what's going on. And I think that is really, what has contributed to the longevity of the project.
And keep in mind, in Connecticut and in Rhode Island, I get in the car with a group of researchers and we drive through a department and we sit down with the police chief when they're identified, and we're there for a couple hours and we walk through everything so they understand it. And we do it all before the report is released. And then we meet with local community people and we do the same thing. And so we have more of an ability, because of the size of our state being really, right, I can get in the car and be anywhere in an hour in our state, and the same in Rhode Island, to do that. So that's sort of an advantage that something we've taken advantage of, which is a little more challenging for a state like California, where in some cases you're plane rides away from communities.
Great. Well, I appreciate the questions from my colleagues on the board. I appreciate the information that was shared. Very helpful, very insightful. I had a question about officer level analysis, but in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and hold that question, since our agenda has about 60 minutes worth of stuff and 30 minutes worth of time to fit that all in. So if I can, we'll go and move to public comment, unless there's a board member that has a pressing question that they would really want to ask at this time. All right, so we'll go and move to public comment, and maybe we do this looking at the roster on the right-hand side of my screen. Quite a few members of the public here. So if we do this in regions and start our public comment this time from the north, anyone in Northern California that wants to speak on public comment, if I can ask you to please keep your comments to 1 to 2 minutes in the interest of time, I'd appreciate it. Northern California. Okay, hearing none from Northern California, Central California. Our guest from the Valley, Central Valley. Okay, just a sound check. Everyone can hear me, right?
Yes, we can hear you,
Okay,
Chief.
all right. Just wanted to make sure.
I know I know there are some interested in Southern California, so.
Excellent. Look forward to hearing comments from our guests from Southern California.
Hello, my name is Richard Hampton, and as much see a need, it seems to be a need, to look at the veil of darkness as a gold standard is anything but. It certainly is not gold when it comes to the data that comes out of California, particularly when we look at the numbers that were computed by the California Department of Justice's TJIS group, because those numbers have no resemblance to reality. And I'm somewhat perturbed that we have spent so much time dealing with the traffic stops that are the foundation for Veil of Darkness. We speak about whether it is possible to see a person driving a vehicle during the hours of day or night, when perhaps 70% of our stops are vehicular and the remainder are pedestrian or something else. I put it to you that a better predictor of the race or ethnicity of a person who is stopped is where they are stopped. I know a little bit, again, I emphasize a little bit about New Haven, Connecticut, that has been the subject of much discussion. I am a Jamaican, and New Haven is full of Jamaicans. 20%, or a number that is somewhat similar. And I'm aware of what happens to my countrymen in New Haven. Perhaps I'd get some response from the experts on that, because it is my opinion that it is their Jamaicanness that has motivated the interest in them for the stops that seem intended to ferret out drug possession. I'm happy to learn that those stops were discontinued or diminished because these people were found not to have the contraband that was expected of them. I find almost as interesting the willingness to kick against the prick, kick against the goad, because what we have learned in the last 2 weeks is that all the denials of racial disparity are made meaningless. I also suggest to you that these people who are more often stopped at night, the people who look like me, tend not to be stopped because stopped at night because they are being fairly stopped, but they're being stopped because they are the essential workers, the people who tend to be working at the hours of darkness rather than the hours of light. I put it to you, learned gentlemen, that you are kicking against the prick. Thank you.
Others from Southern California?
Hi. Hello.
Hello.
I'm Karen Glover. I'm a professor at Cal State San Marcos, near San Diego. So I'm wondering for the experts, the folks who've been talking with us today, if you have any experience, with the stop data work that you do and its connection to issues of accountability. Can you speak to that at all? Because on RIPA we have, these two separate subcommittees, but I'm wondering in your experience if you actually have tapped into any of that side of things, or are you more interested, I guess, in remediation with them? For instance, the story you told and telling the chief there in that one department that this particular practice was leading to this disparity and they end up changing it. I'm just wondering really about that issue of accountability, if you can speak to that. Thank you very much.
I think in the interest of time, I don't know that we have an opportunity to necessarily take questions for the panelists, unfortunately, today. It's unless that question is something that could be answered relatively quickly. We only have a couple minutes.
That's right. I'm sorry. Sorry about that.
If you'd like, I just give you 30 seconds. Obviously, the two are intertwined, accountability and data collection. We've tried to use data to inform decisions of accountability. And so that is always our goal. That is our mission. How do we use data to improve trust and legitimacy between police and the communities they've served? And our data has been used in a number of ways to improve accountability. In particular, the officer level analysis is probably our biggest accountability tool. By the way, folks, just for folks that are attending that have questions, our project website, which has my contact information, so if there's a specific question you'd like to reach out, I'm happy to answer it after the fact. It's www.ctrp3.org. That stands for Connecticut Racial Profiling Prohibition Project. My contact information is on that website, and I'd be happy to answer questions later.
Thank you, Ken.
Hi, this is Michelle Wittig from the Santa Monica Coalition for Police Reform. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, great, thanks. Yeah, I want to first of all thank Dr. Barone for his very revealing presentation in words that most of us can understand. I have four quick comments about the veil of darkness. Just to highlight, it does seem to me that we heard the comment from Dr. Barone, I think it was, or maybe Dr. Ross, that the convergent validity of the VOD procedure is not necessarily very high in Connecticut. That is to say, it doesn't consistently agree, with the other 6 methods. So I want to highlight that because that's a bit of a red flag for me. The second has to do with differences again between California and Connecticut. I believe I heard one of the researchers say that the representativeness and size of the driving public during the intertwilight period in Connecticut captures a huge proportion of the drivers. However, in California, it does not. So I would say that that's a bit of a red flag for generalizing to its use in California. And then 2 more quick points. I appreciate the fact that one of the researchers acknowledged that minority exposure to stops disproportionately is a burden, whether or not they are evidence of racial bias. And finally, the 4th point, a little bit of a nerdy thing. I do question why the researchers prioritize avoiding false positives over all other criteria when judging the veil of darkness to be gold standard. Thanks.
Thank you. Others from Southern California? Okay, hearing none, we will close public comment and move on to our report from DOJ. To our guests from Connecticut, thank you very much for joining us today. Appreciate your insightful information. On behalf of the board, thank you for sharing your experiences with us. And I'll turn it over to DOJ now for the next item on our agenda.
I think, Kevin, you're up.
All right, sorry about that. Hear me?
Yeah.
So we have a few things to talk about today. We're in preliminary stages of updating our analyses to produce for the 2021 RIPA board report. But before we get into that, we were supposed to talk about something at the board meeting, or show you all something at the board meeting, the full board meeting that was supposed to take place earlier this year. We didn't get an opportunity to do that due to COVID and that meeting being canceled. And so we're going to go more into depth with this before, but we just want to make you all aware that the department produced a dashboard using the 2018 RIPA data. So this dashboard is more of like a visual representation of various data elements that you can filter, and it's a dynamic dashboard that will change with the selections that the user makes. And so it's available on our Open Justice website. And so Tiana, one of the analysts here, as well as Dr. Janie Scott, worked on this last year. And so we wanted to give you a brief demo of it real quick, not take up too much time. You can do quite a bit on here, but this is a dashboard that's aimed at allowing for users or interested parties that may not possess the skills or software tools to analyze the raw RIPA data themselves to have basically a user-friendly interface to kind of play with the numbers. So with that, Tiana, who again worked on creating this dashboard, hopefully she can share her screen and kind of briefly run through some of the elements of the dashboard for you all real quick.
Hi, can you hear me and see my screen?
Yes, I can at least.
Yes, we can.
I'm just going to go over it really quickly, given the interest of time. So we created a Tableau dashboard, as Kevin says. You can find this on the Open Justice website. If you go under data exploration here, it's the RIPA Stop data dashboard. You click that and it will bring you to this page. I included the link in the chat just in case you want to look at this yourself later. So how the dashboard is set up is that in the beginning, we just give a brief explanation here regarding what the Racial and Identity Profiling Act is and kind of what kind of data is going to be presented on this dashboard. In these blue links over here, it will hyperlink you. It will take you to the web page to give you more information regarding like RIPA stop data regulations, the stop data collection template, previous reports, and so on. We include a glossary of terms used throughout this dashboard for members of the public who may be unfamiliar with some of the terminology used when discussing RIPA data. And the rest of the dashboard is just covering the data that's discussed in the report. So what this does is essentially take the tables that are presented in the technical report, and we just visualize those tables. So throughout the dashboard, you can filter the dashboard by agency. So automatically you'll view the dashboard statewide, and that's what all means. So it's for all data collected for 2018, but you can select an agency from here and view just that department's data. The dashboard is mainly separated into two large sections. The first section is just the stop level events, which you have up here. We cover number of stop incidents, calls for service, average age, and so on. And then the second visual will be a visual on the location, so where stops occurred. You have a breakdown by agency. If you filter, you only see one agency here. As you hover, you'll be able to get a little bit more information on the stop. I don't think that aspect is working right now. since there's a bit of a lag, but when you view this yourself, you'll be able to see little pop-outs that occur when you hover over a visual, and those are called tooltips, and it just gives you a little bit more information about the stop. The next aspect is just examining when did stops occur, so the time, month, and day of the week that the stop occurred. So you have a heat table here, which breaks down hour of the stop, month of the stop, and then the day of the week the stop occurred. So darker squares just represent that more stops occurred during those times, and then the lighter sections represent less stops occurring during those times. And so you can see the stop data kind of follows this pattern where during high traffic times you have more stops occurring. Then the remainder of the dashboard just focuses on person level demographics. So these visuals below will be broken down by the identity groups. You'll select your identity group at the top section here, and then all the visuals below it will be filtered to that identity group. Unfortunately, you have to keep scrolling back up to this section if you want to see the visuals by that identity group. And then in these sections, we just cover the reason for stop, which is this visual here. For the subtypes, traffic violation type, we do a breakdown of moving traffic, non-moving, and equipment violations, and then also a breakdown of the reasonable suspicion categories, since those two reason for stop elements have subcategories. And then we also cover the actions taken during stops. So here, again, you can filter by agency, and additionally, you'll be able to scroll through this section here and see the reason for stop broken down by the various identity groups. And then the last section is just what was the result of the stop. So again, you can scroll throughout here and see the result of stop broken down by identity groups. And that's just a brief description of the Tableau dashboard.
Tiana, thank you. Just real quick, you said that the tooltips aren't working right now when you're sharing your screen. Is that correct?
It was I think I got it to work now. In the location one, it wasn't working for me, but this is an example of the tooltip. So for the person level demographics, if you hover over a visual, it will just give you a breakdown of the intersection. So since we're looking at the Asian identity group, it gives you a breakdown of the number of Asians who are stopped and the proportion that are male, female, transgender, the disability types that they were perceived to have, English fluency, and LGBT, specifically just for Asian individuals. And this is consistent across all of them. If you're in the stop level the stop level section, like the first three visuals, you'll get a breakdown by agency.
Great, thank you, Tiana. Yeah, and so the idea behind the tooltips then when you were creating it was to kind of give people a way to look at various intersections of the different identities for various outcomes that are included within the dashboard, but in a graphic way. So that was one of the ways that Tiana was trying to implement some of those comments that people were making last year about wanting to see more information regarding the intersection of various identity groups in the data. So, okay, there we go, got my video back. So thank you, Tiana. We just briefly wanted to give you an update on that, let you all know that that exists online. Feel free to play with it. If you have comments about it, feel free to send an email over to the Research Center. We'd be happy to respond to you about it. But that is available. I just know that we hadn't given an update because we haven't spoken to you all in so long, so I wanted to make sure that we went over that with you. So moving forward, the department, as I mentioned before, is in the process of starting the analyses for inclusion in your next year's report. Of course, we seek your feedback on specific things that you'd like to see beyond what it is that we're working on. But for the time being, I'll just kind of go briefly through. I know that we're crunched on time, so I'm just, you'll have to excuse me if I'm not going in detail on some of these things. But I'm gonna, if you look at the meeting materials starting on page 36, there's a section of the document that goes over some preliminary numbers from the 2019 data. And so I'm gonna briefly run through that, and Trent will chime in here in a minute. as well. And so for 2019, we actually had the initial 8 agencies that were collecting in 2018, but we had the addition of these next largest agencies, the 7 next largest agencies, the Wave 2 agencies. So we had a total of 15 agencies collecting for 2019. The new agencies that were added in addition to the Wave 1 agencies were Sacramento Police Department, Sacramento County Sheriff's Office, Fresno Police Department, Orange County Sheriff's Office, San Jose PD, Long Beach PD, and Oakland Police Department. In 2019, reporting agencies reported stops of nearly 4 million individuals. Again, we see in a trend this year that the California Highway Patrol constitutes a large portion of the data submitted. That one agency submitted just over 2 million stops. Los Angeles Police Department and Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department submitted the next closest number of stops. They're still significantly below California Highway Patrol. And so you can see in the first table there that the number of stops submitted by these agencies varied widely. We break down the race and ethnicity of the individuals that were stopped in the data collection period. I won't dwell on this too much, but I'll just tell you all that this looks very similar to the distribution for the 2018 data. None of the percentage of individuals stopped within any one of these racial or ethnic groups hasn't changed by more than 0.9% between years. And so it's still the composition of who stopped as far as race and ethnicity goes was consistent from 2018 to 2019. And that's going to be a general trend as we move through these tables real quickly. That's also the case when we talk about the gender of individuals who were stopped. A majority, over 70% of them, were male. Almost 30% were perceived to be female, and then officers perceived about 0.18% of the individuals that they stopped to be either transgender or gender nonconforming. Individuals between the age of 25 and 34 were, again, this year, the category of individuals who were stopped most frequently. Again, all of those, the distribution there is all within 1% of what it was for 2018 data. The LGBT distribution for 2019 had basically a little over 99% of the individuals that officers reported stopping in 2019. They did not perceive them to be LGBT, with around 0.66% of the individuals they stopped being individuals that they perceived to be LGBT. This was down from around 0.8% for 2018. As far as limited English fluency goes, this is also consistent with the 2018 data. Around 4% of stopped individuals officers perceived to have limited or no English fluency. 2018 percentage was slightly more at 4.7%, whereas we have 4.13% 19 data. Disability type, again, fairly consistent across time. Vast majority of individuals, 98, almost 99% of individuals that officers submitted data for, they did not perceive them to have a disability. When officers did perceive an individual to have a disability, the most common disability type for them to perceive the person as having was mental health condition. That constituted 0.73 percentage points, which is relative to all of the other disability types. A majority of the cases where a disability type was perceived, it was going to be mental health condition. And so this next section here on page 39 breaks down, people who read the last year's report will be familiar with this. This breaks down the reason for stop and breaks it down by race and ethnicity. So overall, we saw for all race and ethnicity categories that the most common reason for stop was a traffic violation. However, that the rate at which individuals were stopped for traffic violation did vary. And the second most common reason being reasonable suspicion. We again see here that Black individuals were stopped for reasonable suspicion at over 20%, whereas the next closest group, being multiracial individuals, were stopped at only 13.2% for reasonable suspicion. So for this year, again, we see that Black individuals were stopped for reasonable suspicion at a rate of about 1.8 times the rate at which white individuals were stopped for this reason, which is consistent between this reporting period and the prior reporting period. Looking back at calls for service, again, we see that it has remained fairly consistent across time between reporting periods. Around 5% of individuals were stopped in response to a call for service, but the other 95% of individuals being stopped on officer-initiated stops. This varied by race. Black individuals had a higher percentage than all other race or ethnic groups for being stopped in response to a call for service at 8.4%. Middle Eastern and South Asian individuals had the lowest at 2.2%. For reference, white individuals had a rate of about 5.17%. And then here, real quickly, we can break down search rates, which again we went into in last year's report, and are planning on continuing to do so in this year's report. But officers searched approximately 11% of the individuals that they detained. This varied by racial and ethnic group quite a bit. Black individuals had the highest search rate at 20.5%. Let's see, Middle Eastern or Southeast Asian individuals had the lowest search rate at about 3.1%. For reference, white individuals had a search rate of about 8.2%. And where we do see some movement from year to year here, I think in any of this document is really here. We had, in the 2018 report, we had Black individuals had basically 18.7% of Black individuals were searched in the 2018 data, but that number jumps up to 20.5 in 2019 with the addition of the 7 new agencies and the full year data collection period. And the number also goes up for white individuals because that was 6.5% of white individuals were searched in 2018, and that's gone up to 8.2%. So relative to each other, though, we still see a trend where Black individuals are searched at 2.5 times the rate that white individuals in the data set are searched at. And in 2018, it was at 2.9, I believe. If I were to look at the fact sheet, it was available online. I believe it was 2.9 or 2.8. So the search rates have gone up, but the ratio has gone down between them just because it's gone up roughly the same raw percentage point amount for the group that had a lower search rate. So we see that there. And so we also have some information and updates regarding search yield rates, but I'm going to let Dr. Trent Simmons talk about that here from the Research Center, I believe. And he can chime in here.
Yes, can everybody hear me?
Yep.
I can hear you, Trent. Yeah.
Great. So this is another area where things tend to change from last year to this year. My goal is to go over this very briefly, given the interest of time. Last year, we found that the highest yield rate was on white individuals at about 24.3%. Here, the range is actually a bit tighter, where you have roughly 19.3% of Middle Eastern South Asian individuals who were found with contraband during searches. And at the upper end of the yield rate analysis, there is about 23.9% of multiracial individuals who are found with contraband. And for frame of reference, about 22.2% of white individuals were found with contraband. And so this is, like I said, the ballpark is a little bit different from last year. But one of the things that we wanted to improve on last year is to do a two-pronged approach to the analysis, where we have the kind of overall descriptive analysis, where we're looking at just the raw rates across different identity groups of what percentage of individuals were searched versus when these searches yielded contraband. But one of the things that we wanted to include here was also kind of a deeper dive into the analysis to really emphasize how much of this disparity is coming from just the identity group in question here. And as part of this kind of deeper analysis, we've also included, to supplement these overarching descriptive analyses, a few statistical tests. And these statistical tests include controls, which allow us to better emphasize more directly how much of the disparity in search yield rates is coming from race and ethnicity. These controls include considerations for how gender, age, time of day, hour, month, a variety of different factors can be contributing to these disparities. We also decided to include all search conditions where the search was considered discretionary. So this excludes specifically searches that were done that were procedural or mandatory, like those incident to arrest, for search warrants, or for vehicle inventory. We also allow these statistical models to consider variation by officer and how individual officers may make different decisions. And then for statistical considerations, we also binned the least frequent racial and ethnic groups together. Specifically, we grouped Middle Eastern and South Asian individuals, multiracial, Native American, and Pacific Islander individuals into one group for the analysis. And then we compared each of these groups specifically to white individuals to see if the search yield rates were different across groups. And what we found overall is that even after controlling for a lot of these different factors, there was still a significant difference between individuals who were brown, Hispanic, and white. And specifically, the results confirmed that Black and Hispanic individuals had lower search yield rates than white individuals. And of course, this is interest to the board based on the disparity in the search rates. So Black and Hispanic individuals, of course, are searched at much higher rates than white individuals, despite being less likely to yield contraband during these searches. And I'll turn it back over to you, Kevin.
Cool, thanks, Trent. Yeah, appreciate you going over the additional level of analysis that we're offering for consideration by the board. And so that the analysis that Trent went over there that goes in addition to the search yield rates that we went over last year is similar to the KPT hit rates that are used in a variety of places, including in Connecticut as well. So that's kind of where we're taking some of that methodology. And so the last few pages of this section that we put together for the discussion at this meeting was just go over some intersectional comparisons. And so here we wanted to come to the meeting not with saying that we've done all the intersectional analyses that you could want, but more so because we heard during public comments and also comments from board members last year that it's understandable that we want to focus on race ethnicity for the 2020 report last year because it's the first report, but to not lose sight of how these different identity groups can interact with each other. And so here we're just presenting a few examples of things that we can do using the data that we collect. And so here in the first section, beginning on page 42, we have a look at gender by race and ethnicity. And so we have a few tables there. Figures 5, 6, and 7 go over racial and ethnic distribution for each gender category. We had to roll up a few gender categories to get decent sample sizes for these. And then we also go over search rates for individuals that fall within each of those gender and racial ethnic categories. And you can see how they vary there. If I had more time, I could talk more about this, but I want to make sure that we have time for discussion. And then we also have a table here that goes over search yield rates in the descriptive manner, not the manner that Trent just went over as a potential update or added form of analysis, but the original manner that we computed in last year, where you can look at search yield rates by a specific gender and also by the perceived race or ethnicity of the people within that specific gender. And so we provide gender and disability intersected with race as examples of what we could do using the data available to us in the RIPA data set. But these are obviously not the only intersections that we could do. We just wanted to provide a couple just to get people thinking and just to kind of show people how much space just a few examples of this takes up and how much discussion you could have with just a few intersections to kind of give people an idea of how wide they want to make the scope for this year as far as which intersections where the board is interested in discussing and exploring some more this year. So yeah, I don't want to go too much into anything else here because I know that we're already going over on time and I want to make sure that the board has time to have discussions. Yeah, as well as another round of public comment.
Okay, awesome. We'll open it up to board discussion. And it just so that people know, I have a hard stop at 3:30. We were planning to go to 3. I have a hard stop at 3:30, so I don't know if we have other business to take care of. We may have to postpone some of the items on the agenda, like the next item, but we'll open it up for discussion at this point to the board.
I'm happy to move to public comments if there was a window for that. But
And I think just to clarify, and Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what you just presented was both the initial stop data analysis and kind of opening up for a discussion of what the board would like the research center to analyze for the next report. To clarify that, like, which is item number 6, basically.
Right. Yeah. So we were just presenting the things that we've gotten through already at this point in the year. Obviously, we still have some additional analyses that we're working on that were included in the first year's report, right? Dr. Raphael and Dr. Kajabi, we've been in conversations with you about some questions that we're having about some of the stuff, so you're aware of those things that are ongoing behind the scenes. So we're working on additional analyses, but this is what we've got completed thus far. And so we're just taking comments on beyond maybe what you've seen in last year's report and what you've seen here today. What direction would you like to take this year's data analysis so that we can kind of begin working on that as we're finishing up the other analyses as well?
So we're looking at pages 46 or so in the packet about the discussion about the board analysis.
Yes. So there's on page 46, there is a draft outline that outlines the various.
And we're looking specifically at the stop data analysis in this conversation. Is that correct?
Yeah, not the other subcommittee's work. Yes, specific to that one, number 3.
We had talked in a prior meeting, I don't recall which meeting it was. We talked in a prior meeting about the discretionary, non-discretionary searches and how does probation status fit into that. And I'm not sure we landed as a committee on a recommendation for that. In terms of the analysis. Any thoughts?
Can I ask maybe a companion to that? Is it true that different agencies across the state might, is there a consistency to if because of parole and probation status, someone might be searched, or does it, in other words, is it required in some municipalities? Is it officer discretion in others, or is it officer discretion throughout the state?
There is no requirement. It is the typical practice, while discretionary, leans towards search as opposed to not being searched. But to your point, well taken, it is not a requirement, it is more officer discretion.
I think the discretion comes if there's no discretion for the probationary or the proe to refuse the search.
And to that, there is not a right of refusal, to your point, Doug. From a research perspective, I'm interested to hear from a research perspective how that is analyzed.
I'm guessing you meant the research center to chime in here. So I know that during the subcommittee meeting where this was discussed at the end of last year, a decision was made to not treat probation searches as low discretion searches. I think that was the consensus at that meeting for the subcommittee meeting at that point in time, and so that's how they were treated as they weren't treated as lower discretion searches in last year's report. Given that precedence that was set during that meeting, and also what we've seen when reading papers from other people who have computed search yield rates, hit rates, discovery rates, whatever you want to call them. This year, we're planning on, as Trent went over when doing that additional level of analyses, filtering down to cases where they're not considered low discretion, right? So those being based on last year's breakdown, those would be the ones that we would exclude would be vehicle inventory, so that's an administrative search. Incident to arrest, again, an administrative search, procedural for the most part, and then search warrants because it's judicial warrant that's gone through additional approvals. So those would be the three categories that were considered lower discretion as for the precedents that was set last year in the board's report, although the board was free to discuss that some more, but that is at least how we've run them thus far.
Other points of discussion?
Kevin, can I ask just to remind me how many categories there are on the search category field?
Yes, I always keep my handy dandy quick cheat sheet that has the regulation fields. So looks like there are, for the basis for search, there are 12 that are available for all stopped individuals, and then there's a 13th reason that's only selectable if the officer indicates that the stopped individual was stopped on a public K-12 campus and is a student. So 12 to 13 categories. So 3 of those categories would be for last year, and what we're planning on doing, unless we receive other direction, would be counted as lower discretion. Those 3 categories that I outlined, and then the rest of those 9 or 10 categories, well, it would be 10 categories would be included still.
Mm-hmm. It just seems to me like I think grouping those 3 as lower discretion clearly makes sense, and maybe you have this nice dashboard that you guys have put together to allow for the opportunity or the accompanying sort of release of the dashboard numbers to allow users to disaggregate the hit rates by the reason for the search for those remaining 9 categories. I know it's hard to do that, because there's page limitations, but perhaps making that available on the dashboard might be a useful thing.
Yes, that's definitely something that the department has been in talks about doing, is producing a dashboard that would allow users to get more specific information about searches and search yield rates. So although the initial dashboard from last year may not have included super specific stuff that gets at yield rates, it's something that the department's been talking about producing. I'll also note that in last year's report, there's a table, and scrolling through the technical report takes a long time. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but we did include a table that went over search yield rates by each of those 13 specific types. So that is available as well, and so we could do something similar if there's interest in that, and include that as an appendix table.
I guess just one other general comment. I think this came up last year, that we're grouping CHP with these departments, and they seem to have very different sort of day-to-day operations, and I wonder maybe if it would be worthwhile to have police department separate from CHP and in some tabs, whether it's an appendix or for key outcomes in the main report.
Hey, Dr. Raphael, this is Trent. I just thought I'd let you know that we have actually run all of these analyses, where we have one overall yield rate analysis for all agencies combined. We have one just for all municipal agencies that do exclude CHP. And then we also have the yield rate analysis for each individual agency. So all of that data has already been created.
I think the question there is how we want to structure it for the discussion in the body of the board's report, or if we want to relegate that to an appendix section with references to it throughout. It's just a matter of how the board would like to see that information included in the report. But we do have, that information, as Trent is mentioning.
Other points of discussion? And then we'll go ahead and move into public comment. And unless there are other questions from the board, hearing none, moving to public comment, and we'll start with our guests from Southern California. So we'll open up public comment to those from Southern California. Yes, sir.
The purpose of RIPA is to determine and to illustrate and make visible disparities between the various groups. The Tableau dashboard does not come close to doing any of that. I believe that the definition of a dashboard is that device that at a glance gives you the information that is important, critical to your purpose. The Tableau dashboard does not, for example, allow me to look at the California Highway Patrol, how it deals with giving citations to Blacks, Asians, and the other two groups, and gives me at a glance the ability to compare those numbers. I speak most specifically here about the city of Los Angeles, how it uses dogs, points weapons, fires weapons at the various ethnicities. I dare anyone to use the Tableau dashboard and to provide us with those answers. I therefore challenge the CGIS group to come up with the answers to those three elements. Compare, as I said, how guns are fired, how guns are pointed, and how dogs are used by the various ethnic groups, and tell us what those numbers are. You would all be shocked. I take you also to the city of San Francisco. Doubtless most of you saw yesterday's video of that officer with her knee on that man's neck. Well, I have looked at San Francisco's data as to how force is used, and I am shocked. Matter of fact, I've run my data twice, and I'm not willing to tell you what I've come up with. I'd like to see what CGIS comes up with for San Francisco. Speaking of the 2020 data and what it portends, I think there has been a massive diminution of the data that has been collected. For example, the California Highway Patrol is down by 15%. 9 of the 15 LEAs are trending downwards. San Francisco and Los Angeles are holding steady, but the remainder are all trending downwards. It would be important for that to be mentioned, because I would not want to have that conflated with the expected downward trend that we shall have because of COVID. It would be good to have that mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. Next public comment from Southern California. Any other public comment in Southern California? If not, we'll move to Central California. And finally, Northern California. Public comment from Northern California. Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and close public comment and move on to discussion of next steps. Throw it back if I can to DOJ and look what are our next steps here.
Kevin, I'll throw it to you since I think the next steps will be primarily from the research center.
Right. Okay. So as far as next steps that we're currently planning on, we're still working on producing the American Community Survey census tables. We're going to be working on fleshing out some more of these intersectional type analyses using the data that exists within the dot data collection system already. So any comments if they come up later about any of the intersectional piece that's in there as examples of stuff we can do? I know there's no discussion or verbiage around it. Any ideas regarding additional types of analyses that people are interested in seeing, we welcome, but we'll be continuing on kind of putting some verbiage around those, some context and discussion. So we'll be working on those as well. Just a brief update on the SWITRS comparisons is that we sent an email to CHP to see if we can get SWITRS data for 2019, and they said that it hadn't, it still was in draft form and wasn't complete. And so we're waiting on that before we can see if we can complete that form of analysis. But during that email exchange as well, they mentioned that the 2018 data somehow weren't totally finalized either. This did not come up during our correspondence with them when we were producing the last year's report using the SWITRS data. We made the request and they just provided it to us. So the assumption was that it was in final stage. So we have to request that once they close that out. And I don't have a timeline. I haven't been provided a timeline for when it will be closed out. So we'll have to give you an update at a future meeting once we're able to get closed out 2018 data to see if anything changed there or if it was just an administrative things where they're technically not calling things finalized, but the numbers aren't changing. And so given that timeline, though, that we're now aware of, that 2018 data, it's 2020, and they're still not providing finalized versions of it, we may encounter a situation where the 2019 SWITRS data won't be available to us in time for us to include in this year's report. And so we may have to explore alternative approaches for finding a benchmark for to be used. There are multiple different versions, but an alternative benchmark to be used to be compared to the traffic violation data for this year's report. And so we're going to be exploring possibilities for alternative benchmarks for that, and then hopefully we'll be able to give you some more information in a future meeting after we have some more conversations with CHP. So those are kind of next steps for us right now. We're welcome to feedback for additional things that people would like to see. But yes, those are the updates that I have as of.
Thank you. Any questions, discussion, comments for DOJ, CGIS? I think that the COVID pandemic may also delay some of the reporting and finalization of documents from even 2018 if it's not done in 2019. So I think the delay is something that we're going to be seeing probably for a couple of years, frankly, while we work through the backlog of things that have happened as a result of this pandemic. So I think the board understands that. I think our communities understand that. We'll need to be flexible in that regard. So thank you for the update. Can I throw it back to, I'm not sure who from DOJ is going to do the service appreciation, but I know that others of us will have some comments as well after that. So is it
yes,
Anna or Aisha?
Yes. Hello, everyone again. This is a bittersweet part of the agenda because we get to say goodbye to some amazing board members, but also give appreciation. So with that, I'd like to have one of our colleagues, Dominique Alcraz, is going to read the first couple of appreciation statements. Thank you, Dominique.
You're welcome. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
Great. Fantastic. So first we want to start with board member Pastor J. Edgar Boyd, who was appointed by Attorney General Kamala Harris and is an original Racial and Identity Profiling Advisory Board member, having served 4 years. Pastor Boyd served on the Stop Data Analysis Subcommittee and was an important presence on the board who offered valuable insight on this subcommittee and on issues related to law enforcement training. His experience provided contributions to board discussions and the annual published reports. Pastor Boyd, thank you for your time, knowledge, and commitment towards eliminating racial and identity profiling here in California. We appreciate your service.
Thank you very much. Glad to serve. It's been my delight to engage in the process that I think will make a lot of difference and touch a lot of lives, and it will respond to what we've been going over and going through now for the past 15 days, inequities and disproportionality in contact, and the insensitivity of a long-standing disparity between communities of color and law enforcement, not only in California, but we've seen it mirrored across the states, all 50 of them in the country. So it's been my delight. I wish the work of the RIPA board well as it moves forward. It's done a lot of good. The data that's been collected has been revelational to so many, and I'm hoping and I'm very concerned that statistical information will be used in a very practical and comprehensive way to change some things and right some things that could be done better and differently. So thank you all.
Thank you. Next, we want to recognize Attorney Andrea Guerrero. She was appointed by Assembly Speaker Emeritus Tony Atkins and is an original Racial and Identity Profiling Advisory Board member, having served 4 years. Ms. Guerrero served as a recent co-chair of the board and as a co-chair of the State and Local Racial and Identity Profiling Policies and Accountability Subcommittee. She also served as a member of the Stop Data Analysis Subcommittee. Ms. Guerrero never hesitated to offer her office space to host the public interested in attending the subcommittee meetings on which she served. She was an attentive and experienced voice on many issues reviewed by the board and provided important guidance in the development of the annual board reports. Ms. Guerrero, thank you for your service to the board, partners, and the people of California.
Okay. Perhaps Attorney Guerrero has left us momentarily, but if she comes back, we would love to have a couple of comments from her. Our next person is Attorney Doug Oden. Attorney Doug Oden was appointed by Assembly Speaker Emeritus Tony Atkins and was an original member of the Racial and Identity Profiling Advisory Board, having served 4 years. Mr. Oden served as the co-chair to the Stop Data Analysis Subcommittee the entire time and has been a member of the Civilian Complaints Subcommittee. Mr. Oden was reliable, always asked good questions, and provided good insight on complex issues before the board. His thoughtfulness and experience were valuable to the development of the annual report. Mr. Oden, thank you so very much for your contributions to the board, the stakeholders, and the people of California.
Well, thank you. And it's been my pleasure to serve on the board. It's been an opportunity to meet some fantastic people. Very appreciative of the work of the DOJ staff. They put together a great report. I think the work of the board continues to be important. And I look forward to continuing to follow the board and its achievements. We have a very, very tough task. There's very tough times out there, and there's no greater need for an advisory board such as this. So I wish the board great success in the future. And once again, thank you for that opportunity.
Great, thank you. Last is Timothy Walker. Timothy Walker was appointed by Attorney General Kamala Harris and is also an original board member, having served 4 years on the Racial and Identity Profiling Advisory Board. Mr. Walker served on the Stop Data Analysis Subcommittee. Mr. Walker's participation as a youth representative on the board was important because so many of the issues within racial and identity profiling adversely impact young people. Mr. Walker is not with us today, but we want to thank him for his service to the board, the community, and agency partners, and of course to all of the people in California. Thank you to all 4 of you. I believe Nancy would like to make a couple of comments.
Yes, hello everyone. Since I've worked with you for 4 years, I just want to personally say it's been a pleasure to work with you, Pastor Boyd, Doug, Andrea, and I'm sorry Timothy wasn't able to make it because I do remember the very first board meeting so vividly. It was a really positive meeting during a very dark time, and we find ourselves sort of sadly in a similar place. But our work has been enriched by your contributions, so I just wanted to say thank you so much, and we'll miss you, but we want you to all come back to the next board meeting so we can give you a farewell with all the board members. And I hope that you will continue to follow what we're doing and let us know what you think. Miss you. Teary-eyed, it's so sad.
Well, I'd just like to say a few quick words of appreciation to all 4, Andrea Guerrero and Pastor Boyd and Timothy Walker, and especially to Doug Oden. Doug, we worked together on this committee for a couple of years now, co-chairing it. It's been my pleasure to serve with you in this important work, and just wish you well in the future, wish all of our board members well in the future. And Doug, thank you for your leadership of this subcommittee and your work on our board for the last 4 years.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate that. Appreciate your friendship.
Likewise. Likewise. Okay. I guess we're at the point of the agenda where we can adjourn, unless there are other items to discuss. I see nothing else on our agenda except for adjournment. So, in that, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All right. There's probably a second there somewhere. Second from Dr. Rafael. And I think we'll just go ahead and adjourn. DOJ, thank you. DOJ staff, thank you for putting the meeting together and making it work. Thank you to my board members and the public for joining us this afternoon as well.
Thank you.